I find it odd that people talk about religion in regard to Stalin or Hitler, or indeed the lack of religion, when clearly their opinion on God was, well, something they outgrew. Not in terms of like leaving religion, but the ideology they had was far bigger than, say for example, if Hitler was raised Catholic, which he was, and Stalin was raised Orthodox Christian, Russian Orthodox. And, you know, Stalin went through the process of becoming a minister. He didn't actually become a minister, but he was going to become a minister, a priest. And Hitler basically consolidated some of his views at different times in his life regarding Christianity, but also contradicted that. Stalin obviously went on to become, well, a completely secular dictator, seemingly, at least for much of his rule over Russia, you know, after he succeeded Lenin. And, yeah, would I say that religion played a role, or lack of religion? Not really. Power-hungry dictators who outgrew any other philosophy. It's a key thing, they grew their own philosophy. You know, Stalinism was not just a continuation of Leninism. People should recognise that. Hitlerism wasn't simply a continuation of, I don't know, some of the ideas regarding, I don't know, nationalistic Germany of the First World War. It was different. And it evolved and expanded and became more, persecuting certain groups, obviously. That goes without saying, really. But I wouldn't say it's a question of simply, oh right, Christian or raised a Christian, therefore we can say that, or dissed God in this statement, therefore an atheist, or whatever the case may be. I mean, a lot of people in the Nazi regime, a lot of top Nazis, were occultists with pagan beliefs or really weird pseudoscientific beliefs. Some believed in ancient rituals. Hitler had his own personal psychic. Also, Himmler believed that the German, like the pure Aryan seed, came from space, possibly on a comet. So these are ridiculous beliefs. If the matter of God has to be engaged with, I don't think they're always talking about the Christian God. I don't think, in regard to the Nazis, I don't think they're always talking about a God when they said God. And I think very often they use the idea of it to fool the people, just as in other cases the reverse is true. And they would use other ideas to massage the people. I think their idea was bigger than, broader than, any form of, Christian or atheistic view. And the same can be said for the USSR, under Lenin, under Stalin, and after Stalin. It wasn't an atheistic regime, it was largely atheist, as in it had no God. Although Stalin brought back the idea of God during the war to consolidate the people, a miracle of saving Moscow and this kind of propaganda move and allowing people to worship again. Manipulation of the people. I'm not sure if these dictators who probably have major psychological disorders, had major psychological disorders, can really be shoved into either camp. They probably saw themselves as the ultimate authority, as being the next best thing to a living God. If that's the case, I mean, in many ways it's very similar to how the Tsars and the Kaisers of those nations saw themselves. The Tsars of Russia saw themselves as being basically on the right hand of God, as being, effectively like a pope, but a bit more divine. And that's the way, the Russian Orthodox Church spoke about the Tsars for centuries, as being divine kings. Very much in a medieval sense, but more recent, up until 1917 with the revolution. Tsar Nicholas II was a semi-divine, king. A divine king, divine rule. A very outdated idea in a nation which was still somewhat feudal. You're not moving beyond feudalism, but even then, it was still backward. And with the Kaisers of Germany, they were figureheads too. Not in the same way, but still their history was. And you go back far enough, it was the same. But yeah. But in any case, they were grand authorities and fundamental to the militarisation of colonial Germany before World War I. was the narcissism of Kaiser Wilhelm II. So people forget this. They forget how these characters come about, and largely you can explain it by these factors. And it was the age of moving beyond religion. With many previous wars, religion was the fundamental. But in modern warfare, it moved beyond that. Like, you could go back to, I would say, the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and that was the tipping point where wars shifted from being very often religious affairs or based on religious principles and ideas, very often sectarian violence extended to bloody warfare, more into the modern concept of more political, nuanced ideas. And that's not an absolute rule, because there were wars before which were more political, but you could dress them up in religious ideas, and very often rulers would do so. But yes, I would say of Stalin, say Stalin's an atheist and say Hitler's a theist for argument's sake. I would say Hitler would have moved beyond, like expanded beyond the mere idea of theism, of any theism, far beyond it. So what would it matter even if he was a Christian or a Catholic? If he's a Catholic Christian, Roman Catholic, it's not Roman Catholic policy to have that. You know, say if Stalin was an atheist, and an atheist communist, bit of a bigger bubble, but then all of the shit he brought through as well, that's a far bigger area. So it's not, you know, a question of, oh, if you're an atheist, that means you're a cunt like him. Or if you're a Christian, that means you're a cunt like Hitler. You know, I just don't think that works. In terms of logic, it doesn't really matter. They both have moustaches as well. You know, does that mean we should, you know, stop moustaches? Mussolini and Hitler were, throughout most of their life, vegetarians. So what, you know? I think Hitler ate meat on a few occasions, and I'm sure the same is true of Mussolini. But, and largely teetotal as well. Hitler was teetotal apart from when, I think when Paris fell, he drank champagne. But in any case, yeah, I don't think you prove anything through selected arguments. And these arguments rage on, but nothing is really gained, because people are going over the same old ground without any new thoughts, or considering the fact that there's more than simply the cliche, you know, nebulous idea of, oh, Christian, or oh, atheist, or theist versus atheist, or whatever the case may be. And you expand that idea into some parts of the world where you end up with terrible regimes. You can't just put down the ideas of Saddam Hussein. You cannot simply say that's a matter of Islam, because he seems to have been for a large part of his career as a dictator over Iraq, he was basically a largely secular Muslim, and then he became more devout, or publicly more devout for propaganda purposes after the failure in the Gulf War. But that doesn't mean that Islam was the fundamental factor behind what he chose to do, his own expression of what seems to have been, once again, narcissism, and the similar traits in his sons, who were as vicious, if indeed not more vicious than him, at least in many cases. So I don't think you can simply put it down to, you know, what is arguably their core belief, or potentially their core belief, when there is much more to their character which goes beyond that. And although they can excuse certain things fundamental to their personal character as opposed to their ideological foundation, cultural ideological foundation, there's a lot more to it. It's far more nuanced than simply saying this person's a Muslim, this person's an atheist, this person's a Christian. It goes far beyond that. It's an oversimplified argument used to express a point which doesn't really work that well when you think about the details.